Well, let's get rolling here. We've got seven whiskeys tonight. We're starting with a distillery that's got a very cool Canadian connection, Holyrood, which was founded by Robin Kelly Carpenter, along with some investors in Edinburgh. Their first whiskey is finally here, which is really exciting. It's called Arrival. It's doubly appropriate because this is the arrival of their single malt after a wait, but also because the distillery itself was founded in a used train shed in Edinburgh. So there's that connection there. The other one that's a little fun little tidbit is that right next to the distillery is the actual police department that fictional detective Rebus is based out of in fiction, but it's a real place, and it's right next to the Holyrood distillery. So I'm going to throw this up on the screen. This is the Arrival. We're going to give a nose and tasting. If you haven't been in on one of these tastings in a while, or maybe this is your first one, we're going to go through the seven whiskeys once together. We'll take some time. We'll talk about them. And then we'll do what we like to call the speed round, where we go back and revisit the whiskeys to see how they've evolved in the glass over the course of the tasting. So here we are, Holyrood Arrival. Quite fruity on the nose. I need to remind myself, 46.1, I believe, is the ABV in this for some reason. Yeah, it's in our description there. Matured in a mixture of Oloroso sherry butts, Pedro Jimenez hogsheads. Somehow, someone on our website, like that must have been an Evan. Hogsheads is one word, not two, but it's hogsheads. Bourbon barrels and rum barriques. So a mix of casks there. And I think with a lot of these new distilleries, one of the things to keep in mind is they want their whiskeys to be drinkable at a relatively young age, partly because starting a distillery from scratch is incredibly expensive, very much cash intensive. Like, you need deep pockets to do this. Think about the fact that you've got to kit out your buildings, let alone maybe build or repurpose them, put the equipment in, buy barrels, buy barley, yeast, pay for heat, light, and power, pay for people to make it, put them into warehouses and pay people to monitor them. Maybe after a year or two, you need more space, so you got to build another warehouse. All of this before you're able to sell any of your product as whiskey. It's not an easy undertaking. Holyrood, I know the timing for them was really tough. Like, they started in 2019, and what happened in 2020? COVID happened. A big part of their business model was having tourists. They're in the heart of Edinburgh, which is, massive visitor center, massive tourist destination in the UK. And they were going to rely a lot on people coming to the distillery, buying the gin, trying cocktails to pay the bills. And for a year and a half, they couldn't do that. So it's great that they made it through. They're a tiny distillery. Most of the distilleries that we're going to talk about tonight are tiny, with one exception. Holyrood's total production capacity is 250,000 liters. That's roughly the equivalent of Springbank, which sounds impressive, except that don't base things based on Springbank, because they do things at their own level. It's about double the size, or almost double the size, of what Edradour could do 20 years ago. That would be, and at that time, it was the smallest distillery. So this is, in the grand scheme of things, still a very, very small distillery. Harmony, why don't I start with you? What do you think about the nose on this one?
I love the nose on this. Like, it's raisin breads to me, toffees, caramels, um, even a little bit of, like, I don't know, like biscuits, like shreddies and like soft leather. It's
Mm-hmm.
really nice.
I like the Shreddies note too. It's a malty whiskey, but you'd expect that. It's
Yeah.
a young single malt. It's very fruity. Uh, Surprisingly, even those, and I hate to use this, but like, rum is not a character that really carries through often in whiskey. Like, what is a rum cask? It's a tired old cask that matured bourbon and then matured rum, and then you're putting whiskey into it. At best,
Yeah.
it's a third, probably fourth fill cask. but a lot of those notes are coming through. It's soft, it's fruity, it's very approachable. I haven't tasted it yet. Have you tasted it?
Oh, I have. I was drinking this last night.
Mm.
And it's like big, juicy red apples that you like bite into, is my initial tasting note. And you get some now lovely like vanillas and ginger notes. And that maltiness still shines through for something that's so young.
It's very malty, still on the palate. Loads of raisin for me. Some nice spices. The fruits, I think you're right, are more in that kind of apple pear, maybe a little bit of citrus. It's a young whiskey, so probably not expecting this to go tropical at a young age, but it's very drinkable. And I know that that might seem like you know things should be drinkable, but for a 3-year-old, I think it is remarkably easy drinking. Kind of apple cider, cinnamon sticks. Like I'm not a big fan of like artificial cereals, but there's something like kind of reminds me of like Apple Jacks from like way back in the day, or like Quaker Harvest Crunch, the one with like little chunks of dried apple in it. Um,
Cool.
mhm,
Yeah, it's quite lovely, and there's that nice like cinnamon raisin bread finish uh that comes in like as a memory for me.
mhm,
Um, and really nice. Kevin in the chat said it's got a syrupy texture.
mhm.
Hmm.
And I think one of the other things to keep in mind when we're trying these things, and hopefully if you like them, you will support whiskeys like this as they go through the process of coming of age, which takes time. Hot cross buns, Frederica, another great note in the chat there. Um, because they're releasing these whiskeys partly because they want to see what people to see what they've done and where they're going, but also because this is part of getting to having, down the line, 5, 8, 10, 12-year-old whiskeys and even older. Holyrood's going to be an interesting case, though, because it's not a distillery that really has a core style. They've been doing a lot of things with fermentation, with barley selection, with yeast selection, and mixing things up. So it'll be interesting to see down the line what they're releasing as whiskey because they've been doing a lot of different things through their distillery. They're kind of exploring what possibilities are out there. And, unlike a lot of other new distilleries, many of which have made a consistent product down the line, which you'll just see maturing, Holyrood might be a little bit like a ping pong table or what's it called, a pinball machine, where like it's kind of bouncing around until it finally figures out what it's going to be because they've got a lot of unique things that they've distilled. And uh, I think Rob has even admitted when he did the tasting in store for us is that what they have no idea what their core style will eventually be like because they've made so many different things in the last few years.
Kind of
So,
like that. I like the idea that they're exploring early and owning it instead of just putting out a mediocre spirit year after year after year and then finding something cool and exciting, go, oh, this is a one-off release. Here it
yeah.
is one time, and then kind of keeping all the cool secrets to themselves. I like the idea that they could be putting out something different
Mhm.
with every release.
Well, I think there's a transparency element to that too. And to their credit, I think a lot of the new distilleries operate this way. Maybe they don't have the luxury of hiding their dirty laundry, so they're going to air it and own it. And I think if you do that the right way, that can potentially be a strength over time. If you're ever in Edinburgh, Holyrood's a great place to visit. It's about an 8 to 10 minute walk from the Royal Mile. So if you're in the heart of the city, it's very easy to visit. You can sit, and at least you could, I'm sure you still can, sit and have a cocktail and look at Arthur's Seat, which is the mountain opposite the mountain that uh, the castle is on. You can also hike up it, although it does get quite steep near the top and it's often wet. But yeah, cool distillery. Great to see it. I know this came in just before Christmas and was sort of hard to get people excited about because we were in the midst of Christmas and things were happening, but it's great to see that it's here. And congratulations to Robin Kelly, who I've personally known now for 15 odd years, for getting to the point of having um, whiskey, actual whiskey. For the last few years, all we've had is gin. And they also changed their gin. I know we're all big fans at the store. Their Heart of Arrows gin, which is made just with, I believe, juniper, beeswax, and sea salt.
Yeah.
It's a very simple recipe, but they make a really interesting, cool gin. So, yeah, I
Yeah, I
think
love it. I think I need to take advantage of that two only per customer and get a second bottle of this because I really enjoy it.
I think if we haven't already done that, we should probably waive it because we've had this for a little while now. We've burned through our allocation of it, and we've been gobbling up what other stores haven't bought. So if you've already
Oh,
bought a
cool.
bottle or two of Holyrood and you want a couple more, who are we to say no at this point? So I'm glad you mentioned that because I hadn't even thought, but obviously we've got a limit on there. So there, I've logged in, I've removed that. So
Hmm.
order what you want. Um, Hopefully sometime later this year, or early next year, we'll see another release from them. Haven't had any word on that yet, but it's got to come eventually. Um, Inchdarnie. Now, Harmony, did you go to the release for this? Were you at the event for this one?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
So probably, maybe it might be more appropriate. Do you want to do the intro on this? Like, I know about the distillery, but I wasn't there for this launch event. I'll fire
Oh,
it up on the screen.
I don't remember a ton. There was a lot going on that evening, and the event was, I don't want to speak unkindly, but it was a bit chaotic.
Ah,
Um,
you know,
uh,
that might be because they were like that agency no longer exists. I think this happened like days before that, and then all the brands got transferred to another company. So,
yeah, it was a very interesting launch, and then on top of that, the food sat in front of us for an hour before we were allowed to eat it.
oh,
Um, it was very interesting. But malted rye out of Scotland, something that's not been done before, apparently. A combination of malted rye, malted barley, blended in a variety of different cask styles that are blended um, and bottled out of Fife was
hmm,
basically the gist of it. Um,
yeah.
it's very cool to see something like this being kind of uh, advertised and sold as Scotch whiskey because we never see that. We see blends and grains, but nothing definitively called rye in the Scotch world. So
Mhm.
I thought that was exciting.
Well, so I know a little bit about the distillery. Um, and I love how Kevin's given us a little chart of the year distilleries were founded here. Very useful. If you're interested, you can click on that. He's put it in the chat. Um, so Inchdarnie was founded 2015. I believe it's a Danish group that's behind it, but also a guy who'd been in the Scotch whiskey industry for a long time. I believe he was an ex-Macallan guy, as often they are. Um, the capacity of the distillery is fascinating because they actually expanded it in the last year or so. It has a total capacity of close to 4 million liters, which makes it fairly large. Like it's slightly larger than average as far as Scotch whiskey distilleries go, which is unusual for one of these new distilleries. It has the ability to both produce grain whiskey and malt whiskey. I believe it has a hammer mill, which is crucial if you want to do something like make rye. I believe there's only one other distillery in Scotland, malt distillery, that's got a hammer mill. Um, and the rye grain for this, I believe, was sourced from Fife. So it is Scottish barley. But the funny thing about this whiskey is that even though the rye is malted, they can't say it's a single malt rye. They have to call it a grain whiskey because the Scottish laws, the Scottish rules around whiskey say that you can have basically two types. You can have malt whiskey or grain whiskey, and those are your only two options. Malt whiskey has to be made from malted barley, and there is not yet at this point a law that says you can make a single malt rye whiskey. So that's kind of fascinating too. The
Yeah.
last quick thing I'll share about this, and then we'll nose and taste it, is relating to the single malt. We have not seen any official bottlings of single malt. I believe the original plans for this distillery were not to release any single malts until they were 10-ish years of age. However, we have seen independent bottlings of Fing Lassie, which is their peated version. And do you remember what the name of their unpeated version is?
No.
I'll dig it up.
No.
I'll find it
Okay.
because it's out there. But these are, I know there's a Rest and Bee bottling of their unpeated version that's in the market right now. So that might be the easiest way to find it. Or if, Jeff or Kevin's on the chat, maybe they'll find it before I can.
Well, is Finn Glassie's they're unpeated, and then it says King Glassie is peated.
Hmm.
That's real.
I seem to remember it having a different name than that, but
I know.
anyway,
Yeah.
who knows? We'll try
It's
and get.
on their website. Who knows?
Oh, that's on their website. Um,
Yeah.
I remember seeing a Rest and Bee bottling recently that had a different name from it, and I remember that. I seem to think that that was. Uh, anyway, let's talk about the Ryelaw. Um, it's funny because it's immediately, off the bat, it's not as like spicy and oily as I would typically expect from like a North American rye, by which I mean an American rye or a proper Canadian rye, not something simply labeled as rye, but actually made from rye grains.
Yeah. It smells like there's like a soft spiciness, but it smells creamy.
Mhm. Even the palate is quite approachable, very fruity. You know, I think I would be hard pressed to suggest if I tried this blind that it's rye whiskey. Like this is not like rye whiskeys we see on our end here. I'd be curious to know like like, and you're at the tasting. Is it 100% rye?
No, it's not. It's a mix of rye and malted barley.
So that
Um,
that that
the
makes a
thing
bit
that
of sense.
yeah, it does. The thing that gives its rye presence away to me is that like licorice
Mm,
note on that palate. It's kind of like iron and licorice at the same time.
mm. Yeah. It's got a nice, like there's a nice malty, earthy profile to it. Those rye spices, you get a little bit of that like spelt bread or like German rye bread towards the back end.
Mm.
Um, but it's not over the top. It's got a nice balance to it. Lots of sort of fresh orchard fruits, but um, nothing really crazy on the palate in terms of a profile, like for a rye. So it's very approachable. The price is a bit of a weird one. Like $200+ is a lot. Now, I don't know if that's a quirk or if that's what they're charging globally for it. I know rye is very hard to work with as far as grains. Like it's messy. It doesn't drain well. So in your wash, not your wash back, your mash tun, you often need to put like rice husks in there just for filtering. But yeah, I think that was the most surprising thing to most of us because like there's some nice jujube tones to it on the nose. The palate's fresh, is very drinkable, but the price is a little bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah. I get like beet juice and orange zest or like burnt orange rinds on the finish for me.
235.
Yeah.
It's lovely. It's well put together. It's got a nice balance to it. Lots of layers, lots of character, but the price seems a little bit steep. Strath Henry. Yes, that's what I was looking for. So I think because I think Fing Lassie is peated. I
And,
think Strath
and
Henry is it? Well,
Glassie's unpeated.
hmm. Well, we'll have to revisit that because it's been a while since I've tasted that one. But anyway, um, the rest in B was also Finglassie. So yes, very cool. Well, if anyone has any other thoughts on that or comments, questions, fire them into the chat. We're going to wander on to the next whiskey now, which is the Hearach from the Isle of Harris distillery. A Hearach is someone who lives on the Isle of Harris. So that's the translation for it. Established 2015. Production there is about 400,000 liters a year. So little almost
Similar.
double the size of Holyrood, but only a tenth the size of Inchdarnie. The interesting thing with the Harris distillery is it was founded by a guy who I believe is a botanist, John Mackenzie, or not, I'm looking at the wrong one there, Anderson Bakewell. That sounds more like a botanist with a name like Anderson Bakewell. But he had a real passion for the Isle of Harris, which is kind of a curious place because it's actually not an island. It's connected to the Isle of Lewis, but it's joined to the Isle of Lewis by a tiny little um, isthmus, I guess is the correct term. On the other side of that isthmus is like an insane mountain range, which they only managed to build a road over about maybe 30 years ago. So Lewis and Harris were always considered separate islands because you couldn't just like easily travel from one to the other. You had to take a boat. So that's why they treat them like they're separate islands, even though they're not. And the Harris Distillery is located on that isthmus on the Isle of Harris, founded 2015. The cool thing about the Isle of Harris Distillery is that it is there to provide employment for people on the island. It is also there to be, a legacy for those people as well. Mr. Bakewell didn't build the distillery for himself. He invested in it to give something back to the island and the people that are there, which is kind of a noble aim. It's sort of like what Hedley Wright, the late Hedley Wright, did with Springbank, though hopefully Mr. Bakewell didn't put it into a series of trusts that can't be changed. That it's maybe there just to give people jobs and encourage people to stick around and give back to the island. So this is the first release of the Hearach. It came in also, frankly, like a week before Christmas, 1 or 2 weeks before Christmas. It just popped up in the store. And they did something unusual with this because though it is a first release, um, they did several different batches of it, which then begs the question, are they all the first release or not? Is the first batch of the first release the first release? Uh, I suppose it doesn't really matter. They were all made with a similar recipe, small batch. We were told we were getting batches, I believe, 4 and 5, but the one I wrote a tasting note on, which we got from the shop, was batch 3. So
Mhm.
possibly subtle differences. Like I don't know if you've looked at the bottles or if you've seen anything on their Harmony to see which batches have been coming
Well,
through.
every case I've opened has been three so far.
Oh, so
Yep.
then maybe we didn't get 4 and 5. We just got batch 3.
Yeah, that's all I've seen so far. But there's 8 batches total for the first release,
Something
I
like
think.
that. And
Yeah.
then I know there's a second release coming out shortly. We'll
Yeah.
probably see it in Canada maybe by the summer. So this is a lightly peated single malt, 12 to 15 ppm. The whiskey is all at least 5 years of age from ex-bourbon, Oloroso, and Fino sherry butts as well, and then married in small batches for at least 12 weeks before bottling at 46%. Price on this is 125. Just nosing it, to me, it's got a nice balance to it. The elements of the bourbon and those sherry casks, but also that really gentle, soft peat in there too.
Yeah, it's pretty floral. I'm finding compared to like the first two and still malty, lots of like fresh fruit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got a nice, clean smoke profile to it.
Mhm.
Loads of
Really,
apple,
really
citrus.
clean.
Um, and then I'm just looking at my tasting note that I wrote on this probably in January. Like there's like a sort of a flinty, chalky minerality to it on the nose too.
Hmm. And that minerality shows on the palate as well.
Mm, yeah.
Well, that peat is really nice.
Yeah. It's lovely, lovely peat integration, soft vanilla, more of those like white and citrus fruits. It's buttery. You start to see a little bit of the sherry towards the back end, like a bit of chocolate leather creeping in. But it's got a lovely body to it, really, really nice balance. And yeah, it's quite tasty. Um, is the batch
Yeah.
number on the bottle? Phil is asking. Harmony, you may know better than this. Well, actually, I've got a bottle here.
Well,
I think,
I know it's on the band over the top of the bottle, like over the cork. I don't
right,
know if it's on the label.
right.
It might be on the back of the bottle.
No, you're right. That's how I know this is batch number three, which is the one I've got
The
here.
bottles are really beautiful too. Like they
Yeah.
did a good job. Um, the gin bottles are gorgeous. The bottles of the whiskey are very nice. The package on the whiskey is terrible, but the bottle is great.
You know what? Well, I'm of two minds on the packaging of it because I agree with you. It's not the best, but I think the intention with it is that it's like some other distilleries, like Ardnamurchan, they're trying to make it sustainable. Like they're trying to make it recyclable. Because if you think about like most other distilleries packaging, there's bits of foam, there's bits of metal, there's magnets.
Yeah.
I think they were going out of their way to try to create something that looked cool and impressive. Like there's a little booklet tucked in there, but
Hmm.
it could also be recycled. The problem is if you break that little cardboardy bit that holds it together, you can't put it back together.
Yeah, the
Um,
problem is you have to pick it up with two hands every time, like it's like a new baby, and you just have to carefully bring it over to the table to open.
are
So
you
if you're
supposed
holding a
to do
glass
this
of
with
whiskey and
me?
you want to show it off to your friends, like you could be picking it up off the floor.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. Always pick up babies with two hands. Um, this is the gin bottle. If you haven't seen it, it's I believe, a kelp infused gin.
Sugar
Is
cup,
that it?
yeah.
Sugar kelp, and the
Yum.
glass, I believe, is even made with something from the island. Like so,
Yeah,
it's
they have a gentleman that goes out and harvests the kelp, and he only cuts it to like a certain point so as not to harm the kelp or the reef so that it can always regrow and ensures that the coast stays healthy,
mhm,
which is pretty cool.
yeah. There's an interesting connection here, both with the Harris distillery and the Torabhaig, which we're going to end with, because these are distilleries that really, in a lot of ways, put their employees and the community first, which is sort of a new approach to things. And we'll get to the story with Torabhaig when we get there. Uh, but there's something kind of charming about that, and uh, you know, I think what happens when you do that with people at your business is you make them uh, not just accountable, but like they take ownership of things and they take greater pride in it. And so it's kind of cool what they've done with the Harris distillery, with their gin, which is expensive, but it still sells. Their single malt is on the pricey side of some of the newer whiskeys we have out there, but I think the quality there is
Mhm.
kind of stepping up to the bar. So maybe the
Yeah,
second release will be a little bit lower priced. I hope it will. But for a
yeah,
first release, we don't have a ton of that left. When it's gone, it's gone. And I think they
yeah.
did a good job with it.
No, I think they did a really good job. Especially, I mean, peated whiskeys are very sought after in the Scotch world, and I, if it's not from Islay, it doesn't quite seem to get the same respect. But I think for their first whiskey coming out with this nice lately peated,
Mhm,
balanced whiskey, I think they're doing a very good job of showcasing a different island in Scotland and what they can do.
mhm. Well, we should move on to Nc'Nean, which I'll admit is a distillery I don't know a ton about. We're back to small. In fact, this is now smaller even than Holyrood, just 100,000 liters a year. It's near Gleann, uh, which is on the west coast of Scotland. The distillery is small, I believe, and Harmony and I were trying to do some fact checking on this, but I believe it was intended to be the first distillery owned and run by women when it launched. Um, I don't know if that's 100% true, but I know that was something they were talking about in the early days of it. We have the single malt, organic single malt whiskey from Nc'Nean. That's what we're going to sample here at 46%. Matured in a mix of ex-red wine casks, Oloroso sherry, and ex-American oak casks. The other thing that's noteworthy on this is that this is one of the Jim Swan distilleries. So the late great distillery whisperer Jim Swan was behind this distillery and helped get them off the ground. Sadly, I believe he passed away just a year or two after they opened, but he did have a role in it, as he did with places like Cavallan, Kilchoman, the Cotswolds, and many, many other distilleries. So let's give this a nose and taste. I am a virgin Nc'Nean drinker. This is my first time nosing or tasting it. Harmony, why don't you kick us off here? What are you getting on this?
I, I need water. I'm still very mineral and peated from the last one, I think.
We may have to talk to Evan about that because I believe he suggested the order. So
Oh, it is salty, Kevin. Like it smells salty. Like I don't, is it coastal in any way or is it just
I
salty?
believe so, yeah. But I mean, think about this. Well, don't even have to think about this. It smells like Play-Doh to me, which I believe involves salt. Like, doesn't
A lot.
correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, my kids are adults now, so one of them is almost a quarter century old. So I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure Play-Doh involves salt if you're making it yourself.
It's very mineral. It's like got soft fruits, like very gentle nose. It's not, I don't find the nose quite as like in your face as some
Mhm.
of the others, but it's quite beautiful.
Mhm.
Just loads of fruit.
Um, so long fermentations, well, a mix. They have a range of 65 to 115 hours for fermentation, which is quite a wide range. Um, I'm not getting, at least I don't think I'm getting any peat on this.
On the nose, I'm not. I'm getting lots of like pears and peaches and
Mhm. This is to me, it's very floral, honeyed, very floral, loads of orchard fruits, like again, those like sweet apples, pears. Um,
this is also organic, is it not? Did we talk an organic whiskey?
I have questions about that though. Like don't I don't want to be that guy, but like I remember when Gordon MacPhail came out with their organic whiskey, the Ben Romick Organic, which was the first certified organic whiskey on the market. And it was matured in virgin oak because that was the only way they could be guaranteed that they were using organic certified casks.
Right.
My understanding is that it's very hard to get certified organic sherry casks. They might very well have found a way to do that, but this is one of only two, I believe, fully sustainable distilleries in Scotland from the standpoint of the fact that it uses completely renewable energy to power its operations. So the other one I think is Ardnamurchan, like because they use wood-fired burners and um, bio stuff, not an engineer or a scientist. So someone will know what I'm talking about. They'll put it in the chat and then I'll repeat it.
Um, so Andrew, I'm curious to know what you think of this as it's partially red wine cask finished.
Um,
It's
I'm I'm
very
not,
gentle.
I'm not picking up a wine cask influence, but this is where I think things get interesting because this is again a Jim Swan distillery, and that means STR casks. And I think that's what they're probably talking about for red wine
Yep.
is the shaved, toasted, recharred casks. those are great for maturing whiskey. And I mean, we've seen a lot of companies do that with great success. Kilchoman's done it. Cavalan's done it. The Cotswolds Distillery's done it. Lots of other people have done it. You know, we talked about this. I'm trying to remember. I did a tasting with Evan on Sunday night, and we were talking about wine casks and port casks with Grant Stevely, who's a distiller. And a lot of times, I think the problem with wine casks is that they're not dumping the barrels before they fill whiskey into them, so they're wet filled, so there's still some wine left in there.
Yeah.
Or, you know, maybe the issue is the cask spoiled and then they put whiskey in and I don't know, they didn't rinse it or do anything to it before they put the spirit in. Um, yeah, whatever they've done with this, like there's nothing in this that makes me cringe from wine caskiness. So
No, I think they did a really good job. And for me, it still feels very like jubes and citrus for me. And it's just very soft oak tannins. Um,
mhm.
it's very approachable. It's very nice.
Sue and Kevin both get mint on the finish. Um, I would agree with that in the sense that it reminds me of like a Japanese highball, like your 1 part whiskey, 6 part soda, and fresh mint, which is like the classic Japanese highball. So yes, I can see where you guys are going with that. Again,
Nice.
it's young. I mean, of the first four so far, you know, and I'm not trying to sway people's opinions, but I feel like the Hearach had the most kind of depth for a young whiskey, but all of them show a lot of promise. And like this is the starting point for all these distilleries. I hope this is not what like all they have in 10 years time, but like it's a great starting point. Very fresh, very drinkable. But I think you were right. We talked about this before the start of the tasting. I think we should have had that before the Hearach. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
But still very cool, very good.
yeah. We'll blame that on Evan because he's not here to defend himself. So
Yeah.
did he create a poll for us though? We'll find out. Um,
Oh,
Possibly
yeah.
too late for me to make one if he hasn't already done it. But
Could redeem himself if a poll is made.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in his defense, I've been to one, two, three, four of these distilleries, and if I'd had time, I could have put together a slideshow of photos, but I didn't. So who am I to throw stones at a glass house? I can just repeat things I learned while visiting said distilleries. So we're off to the Isle of Raasay for the next two distilleries here. Founded in 2017 on the island of Raasay, which you have to go to the Isle of Skye to get to. So it is kind of a remote distillery. It is a rather beautiful place, though. We're dropping down in production again, though. Well, actually, no, sorry, we're going up to 220. So, like, put these things all on like a graph. Like, the largest was 4 million. The smallest was 100,000. We're at 220. But all of these are relatively small distilleries, very small production. Um, and we're going to another distillery that's got an interesting range of fermentations, a range of 67 to 115 hours, both peated and unpeated malt. And these two whiskeys that we're going to try are single casks that have only come to Alberta. They were bottled by Andy Dunn of Gold Medal Marketing exclusively for the market. They're actually casks that he bought and had filled and then waited on to bottle. So let's start off here with, I'll share my screen, make sure I'm on the right one. The Raasay NaSia Gold Medal Marketing Peated, or sorry, that's not the one we want. We want the unpeated one. We want the unpeated Ex-Rye cask. Sorry, that's where we're going to start off. So here we go. 61.5.
61.5.
Yeah. So an
That
ex
explains.
rye cask.
Yeah. That
It's
explains the palate along with that rye. Like it's feisty.
well,
In a good way.
it's very naked. I mean, there's not
Yeah.
a lot of color on this. Um, I would say the nose is fairly shy, like it's malty. Um,
the the nose was very hidden for me. There was almost nothing to it other than the suggested salted chocolate
Mhm.
from Kevin. Once he said that, I was like, oh yeah, it's in there a little bit. The palate for me is like more chocolate, tons of spice,
Mhm.
um, more malt, like spicy, peppery malts.
Yeah. It's
Mm.
malty, it's musty. There's like a mushroomy earthiness to it on the palate. Um, Salty, like there's loads of salted caramel here, and just a ton of spice, like fennel. I would even say like curry spices, like Indian curry spices, as opposed to like your sweeter, more festive spices. Jim's saying a nice, beautiful mouthfeel. Hmm.
Hmm. It does.
You know, this is surprising to me. I don't know if it's the barrel chart, but it surprises me that this is unpeated because uh, there's almost like a wood smoke element to it, and it could just be the barrel
Well,
chart.
I was gonna say that too. It has a smokiness to it, but I think that's the oak tannins, like, and possibly the rye just in itself. But yeah, there's definitely some char on this in the finish for sure.
Well, I mean, I would also say that I think this is the kind of whiskey that would appeal more to a peated whiskey drinker than it would to someone who likes a softer, unpeated style. Because I mean, it's got a big, bold, very maritime coastal profile.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Good job, Bandy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Burlap, getting some burlap on there too.
There was also this, like, I don't know, it was like alcohol, like evaporating in my mouth, but there was a little bit of that wah um, finish to it, like
I
menthol
think
or
that's a Kia. It's a Kia car or a promotion from
that's
Kia.
it.
It's
Yeah,
wow.
that's what I was getting on that finish there.
Korean wow. Um, maybe I don't know. Let's go to the peated one. So the peated spirit they do is 48 to 52 ppm. I've been to the distillery. It's rather small. It's got a lovely view. It looks over towards the Isle of Skye, which has is very dramatic mountains. The Cullens, which incidentally, if you've never seen the video of what's his name, Danny McCaskill riding a mountain bike down one of the Cullens, you really should. Your palms will sweat for fear that he is going to die, but he doesn't. It's a very cool video. I believe it's called The Ridge. Look it up. It's worth it, especially if you like biking. Um, this is surprisingly on the nose for something that's heavily peated, much more approachable. Uh,
Yeah.
I've had some Chinkapin oak casks before, not many. I'm going to concede I don't even really know 100% what it is. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, Harmony,
I
because
was
it's not,
gonna ask you because it's showing up everywhere.
well, I think it's, when people run out of other types of wood, they start searching for interesting ones. So according to this, it's Quercus muhlenbergil. It's a form of white oak from I'm not sure where. Still trying to figure that out, but it's American. Looks like it's from America. It's American. Um,
American white oak called something else. Cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Patrick saying maple syrupy, Jim Horton. I don't know if that was the last one. It might have been. I think it was the last one. The comment on that. I haven't got to the mouth yet, but it's got a nice kind of toasty, chocolatey caramel note. The smoke is very clean on the nose. I'm getting more like chocolate covered gummy bears for whatever reason is what's in my head right now, which is not something I've had in a while. I don't know where you get those, but they're
I bet
delicious.
Crystal could make them.
Ooh, chocolate dipped bacon gummy
Yeah.
bears.
You'd have to do them on like a skewer.
Yeah.
A
Oh,
gummy bear
yeah.
skewer and like a chocolate fountain for Lassie's Fest. I don't know.
That might not be the most Lassie's Fest friendly food. I don't want to prejudge things, but it seems like
We
what
don't
I'm
know. We've
bringing-
never done it.
true. That is true. We haven't done it. So, but once again, ladies, if you're free next
Chocolate
Friday,
fountain.
gather your girlfriends and come to a whiskey festival.
Yeah.
It'll be worth it.
Yeah,
How
there's very toasty and tons of dark fruit on there. It's like everything in this was smoked. Like the
yeah.
fruit was smoked. The chocolate was smoked. It's like chocolate bark. Um, I like it.
I like that a lot more than I thought I was going to. It's like, I don't know, a chocolate bacon like choo-choo train just runs you right over. Like it flattens you. Um, man. Uh if that's what Chinkapin is like, I mean it's more like classic quote unquote European oak than American white oak.
Mm. Oh,
It's very
yeah.
oily too, viscous, oily, nice clean salt. Um, Smells a little swampy, Kevin's saying, but in a good way. And then he's attached an article to presumably something to do with Chinkapin oak. It's the cool new kid on the block. Um, so there you go. We could dig into that, but there's no time for that right now. We'll dig into it more later. But I think both the peat and that oak type have made this more approachable and more drinkable at a younger age. Frederica's saying smoke and Dutch spice cake on the nose. Um, yeah, and there's almost like a Dutch licorice, like maybe not quite as big and salty as like some Dutch licorice, but it's got that kind of saltier Dutch licorice profile.
Mm,
Mm,
that's cool.
yeah. So that's the Raasay NaSia, which I don't know if that's like where the NaSia part of this comes in. But it's maybe that's single cask. Maybe that's their translation of single cask. Because both of these have that in the name. I'll fire that in the chat for you as well. So we've got both of those. And then we're on to Torabhaig. I was lucky to visit Torabhaig in June last year. The weather was dreadful. Um, it's a beautiful location, even when the sun's not shining. The distillery is fascinating. It's an interesting story as well, too. It was actually originally the dream of a guy named Sir Ian Noble to found the distillery on the Isle of Skye. Sir Ian Noble was a big proponent of the Gaelic language and Gaelic culture. He made a fortune and he wanted to really provide the people on the island a reason to stay. So we kind of heard this before with Isle of Harris distillers, but it's also true of Torabhaig. Sadly, he didn't live long enough to see his dream come to fruition, and it ended up being carried forward by another company. And I'm actually able. I took photos of this, and they're not too long ago, so I can find them. I've actually logged on to. I've got my Instagram feed up here, so I can actually show you photos of Torabhaig
Cool.
distill. Um, so this is a view across their cooling pond. What's really cool here is they took an old farmstead that was actually a listed building. Oh, that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to click on that one. There we go. There's a close up. That's looking towards, uh, I believe, uh, that might be the Arden American Peninsula there. And then beyond that to the right is the Isle of Mull. There's the water source. This is looking down from the water source at part of the castle, or not castle, the farmstead building that they built the distillery into. There is a little castle, Castle Shamus. There's a
Beautiful.
little bit of it out in front of the distillery. There were lots of battles between the McDonalds and the McLeods, and probably some McLeans in there and some other Macs and Micks. But this is the site. That's the little harbor. And this is the courtyard inside it. A lot of these farmsteads were built in the form of a kind of square or defensible courtyard, so that, you know, if the enemy was coming, they could bring their cattle and presumably women and children and put them inside and protect them from what was coming. Here we go. These are some more shots of the distillery. I did a couple of different posts. And they crammed a distillery into this listed farm building, which was tough because they had to preserve the building's character without changing it dramatically on the outside. Obviously, the inside is all brand new, wooden washbacks, pair of stills there, relatively large production compared to most of the distilleries we've been talking about today, 500,000, but still only 1/8 the size of Inchdarnie. What else can I tell you about the distillery? One of the things that I learned there that was really fascinating, and these are named for Sir Ian Noble and his wife. His wife actually owned the land and sold it to the owners of Mossburn Distillers, who were the ones that wanted to build a distillery. And one of the attractions to them of starting it at Torabhaig was that it already had planning permission from the Isle of Skye, so it was easier for them to get the ball rolling. They took a really interesting approach to how they wanted to start up a distillery and find people for it. They could have gone around Scotland and tried to poach people from other distillers, convince them to move to the Isle of Skye, but instead, they just started approaching local people on the island and gave them an opportunity to learn a new trade, to fund their education, and then at the end of that, there would be the guarantee of a good job. So they have 6 production employees. None of them are master distiller. They all do everything. Their employees range from someone in their 50s to a young woman in her 20s. And one of the cool things about the way they're approaching whiskey production there, they do have a core range style, which is a heavily peated, but a very clean peat profile single malt. They also allow each of their 6 production employees to make anything they want for 2 weeks every year of production.
Oh, that's so cool.
So think about that. That's 12 weeks out of 52 every year. So almost a quarter, or roughly a quarter of their production, their employees can make whatever they want. And there's some weird stuff in their warehouse as a result of this, which I think a lot of which will be cool in time. But what it's also doing is it's empowering their employees to take risks, to do things that are different, to innovate. And I think Torabhaig is going to be an interesting distillery to watch. The first whiskey was released, I believe, almost 2 years ago now. It's coming to Canada in April, maybe late March, but more likely early April. And one of the things that they really pride themselves in with it is what they call their well-tempered peat. So it's peated, it's prominently peated, but it's not aggressively peated. They're not trying to replicate Islay whiskies. They're trying to do something very different. So once
Kind
more,
of like
what's that, Harmony?
that peat is like a smoked seaweed
Yeah,
kind of peat.
it is definitely a different profile. And I mean, look at the color on this. This is very pale. So
Yeah.
they didn't go down the route of put everything in fresh first fill bourbon. Uh, this is really a barley forward, spirit forward style of whiskey. So this is their Allt Gleann. This is their second ever release. There's a batch strength of this coming as well. So same whiskey, but just at a higher ABV. I believe their plan was to release a total of 4 different unique whiskey styles, only one at a time, until they hit 10 years of age. And then they'll have a 10-year-old whiskey, and then everything else will follow after that. But, you know, given they started 2016, we're still about 2 years away from that 10-year-old. This was matured in a mix of 80% first fill bourbon, 20% refill. bottled at 46%. This is the really fascinating part, though. The barley was peated to 77 parts per million with Highland peat, not Isla peat. But the effective peating in the glass when you get to the bottle is just 17 parts per million. So it's coming across almost as like a Bowmore level of peat in the liquid as opposed to what they peated the malt to.
Mhm. There's a beautiful like honey note on the finish that just like pops in when you think it's just going to be smoke the whole time. You get this beautiful kind of honey
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
smell.
it's ashy, like
Mm-hmm.
some apple, lemon. There's almost something that reminds me. My dad used to make me eat porridge. Um, I used to think it was punishment, but I think he was just trying to be healthy. But he boiled it, so when he wasn't looking, I'd often put a bit of honey or brown sugar in it just to make it edible. And it reminds me a little bit of like my dad's porridge when he turns his back, and I've put a bit of brown sugar.
Well, that's nice. But I
Salty, though.
get that. I can get that.
Yeah, salty, nice, clean smoke. Um,
Yeah.
it, again, like you can tell this is a younger single malt, but it's a younger single malt that's got a ton of promise to it. And I love that salty, fruity, ashy
Hmm.
intermix of flavors in this. I think it works really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. There's a nice campfire vibe going on. Uh, One thing I do really appreciate is their transparency about peat. Like before and after,
Mhm.
because I think it could be really misleading and really intimidating also to people who are maybe looking to get into peat, and then
Mhm.
they'll see something that says 50, like, oh, that seems high. And then, but maybe it's not because what it presents in the glass is very different.
Well, yeah, one of the things when I went to meet with them that they really drove home, and it's really one of the core messages from their distillery, is that it's what they call well-tempered peat. This is not
Yeah.
aggressive, over the top, rough, raw peat. It's much more balanced than that. While we're on this, since I only just noticed this, but it makes perfect sense. I went to Raasay right after I went to Torabhaig. So I have photos of Raasay also from my Instagram that I can share.
Well, we
Uh,
have a speed round.
yeah, we'll go to the speed round, but I'm going to quickly show some Raasay photos because this is the
Cool.
Raasay distillery. Again, built into an old building, but then there's a modification on the end of it. I had a nice beer and some nice food there. Stainless steel fermenters. Um, yeah, uh, I think I had to take some of these photos surreptitiously. Some of these places don't like it when you take photos. There's the stills, all very modern on the inside. Lots of young people there. Like I think the whole distillery is being run by very young staff, which is interesting. What else have I got? There's where the spent grains go, the malt at the end of the process, and that's in their tasting room. Um, they're really big on. There's the Cullens. You can see the Isle of Skye on the other side of the body of water there. So uh, it's a cool distillery. I don't know why, but they make you eat chocolate with every tasting, which I know some people love, but for me, for my palate, to get a real sense of things, the chocolate's great, but I want to taste the whiskeys first before I get to the chocolate. Um, but they did a whiskey and chocolate tasting or pairing that was kind of fun. They had some fun chocolates there too. Um, but yeah, speed round. Are you ready for the speed round, Harmony? Is that
No,
you're not? Why aren't you ready for the speed round?
never ready.
You're never
Some of these
ready.
glasses have less whiskey than the others.
Oh, that does that imply you have a sense of where your preferences are already? You know where your favorite.
Not always. Sometimes it's because I struggle to find things,
Hmm.
and so I have to keep sipping it until the words come to my mind.
Okay. Well, let's start where we began. So we're back to the Holyrood. While we're doing that, since I've found other photos, I am back on my Instagram profile trying to find photos of a time I went to Holyrood Distillery.
Was
So
that was Scott with you the whole time you guys were on that trip?
no, but that's because I was at Tomatin right after I was on Sky, and that's why I kept accidentally rolling over to photos of the Scots, both Scots, Scott one and Scott two. Um, but yeah, Holyrood. Trying to find a photo of that. But while I'm doing that, let's focus on the whiskey. What are you getting on the whiskey?
Oh, it's
To
still
start out with?
good. There's so much fruit.
Mhm.
Like there's so much fruit. You could just it's like a fruit salad on a side of well, you said porridge, but now I want to say porridge, but it's bigger than that.
Maybe it's more cream of wheat.
It is a little bit more cream of wheat with honey in it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice spices, cinnamon too. Like I find cinnamon in this really nicely balanced.
it's rich. It's got a lovely balance to it. Nice palate. Um, Eminently drinkable, one might say.
Mm.
Yeah, nice release.
Kevin
Uh,
says he's getting kiwi and melon now.
yeah, there's a lot of nice fruits in that. I agree with you completely. Um, what about what's number two? The Inchdarnie.
It's
It's
more
rye.
rye now.
It is, but I would still describe it as being like rye adjacent. Like the rye notes are not over the top. It's not overpowering.
It's very green, green and rye. Hmm. I agree. There's quite a bit of dill on too. That's the
It is
green and the rye that I'm picking up.
it is very dilly. That is a good call. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, fresh, drinkable, enjoyable, pleasant. Lots to love
Yeah,
there.
it is.
Um, all right, what's next? I'm striking out
Right.
on photos of Holyrood. I know they're in this Instagram profile somewhere, but the Hearach's very chocolatey. That nice subtle edge of peat in there is quite nice too. I give up. I can't find them. Mm, I love the palate on that. It for a young whiskey, it's got lots of nice layers to it. Nice weight to it. I like the body on it as well.
I'll never be able to drink this whiskey without thinking about Victoria. So
Why?
I was doing my lap around the room to decide where I was going to start. And at the time I had to push back past a lineup of people because they were pouring Pappy Van Winkle. I had to push past them. I was like, I don't care. And
The
the
right
lovely,
attitude, by the way.
yeah, and the nice people at the Hearach table were greeting me and inviting me over. And I said, like, no, I'm going to try it, but I'm not
Harmony, come
I'm
on.
not
It's very
exactly. And I
good.
said, I'm not ready for Pete. I just like, I haven't had a drink yet. I'm not ready for Pete. He's like, oh, then you have to have it. And he pulled the glass out of my hand and filled it up and he gave it to me. And I'm very reserved and I don't speak by mind. So there's no way I would have said, there's effing Pete in this. I said I didn't want any Pete. And then I looked at him and I said, you ruined my tasting. You
Yeah.
ruined the whole experience with your
You ruined the
delicious
Victoria
whiskey.
Whiskey Festival.
And he was so upset because I was like, you ruined it. And he has the look on his face. I'm like, you ruined it with your delicious whiskey. But I wasn't ready for Pete.
Well, it's true. It's a flavor that you try to put off as long as possible to keep your palate fresh.
And I told him I'd come back. It will be my first Pete. I'm just like, I've never been here
So,
before.
in defense of him, though, like think about it this way: if you're at a festival, you're trying many dozens of things.
Yeah.
If you leave all the peated stuff till the end, you're not copus mentis. Like you're not able to fully appreciate the peat, maybe in the profile of the whiskey. So maybe in a way, he did you a favor.
Yeah. Well, it's memorable. I'll never forget it.
Note to anyone here pouring at a whiskey festival: don't take Harmony's glass and pour her a dram against her will. You will
She will
ruin the
drink
festival.
it and remember you.
Yeah. I'm on to the Nc'Nean, still very pleasant. I'm finding it a touch hot on the palate, but not sharp, not rough.
There's way more melons on it this time on the nose.
Mhm.
And then for whatever reason, the palate seems more floral
Yeah.
than it did the first time.
It's a little new makey to me. I'm
Mhm.
getting almost a little bit of a coppery hint to it. So yeah, I still like it, but it's showing its youth more than some of the other things I'm finding personally. So
But you said a highball with this. I think that would be awesome.
well, I think we should do, well, we can't because
Yeah.
AGLC, but you as consumers can make highballs for yourself with Nc'Nean at home. 1 part whiskey to 5 to 6 parts soda and fresh crushed mint, a little bit of ice.
Yeah.
There you go.
Slap that mint. Yeah.
Nice little
Yeah.
Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
What about the Raasay? We're back to Raasay. Raasay Unpeated. The
I
nose is,
love the nose.
I get I don't know, like not beer nuts, but like honey roasted peanuts, maybe.
Peanuts was the very first tasting note I had on this whiskey when I tried it at the store, just like the other day, because there was like a little bit left in the bottle, and the peanuts was my first thought, and it must be the cask.
I think they should have left this one for a couple more years. It's it's drinkable. I mean, it is this we're at cast strength here for this one, right? What are we at for this? 61.5. Um, Harmony notes to whoever did the labels on this. Font is hard to read for those of us who are getting older and don't want to wear bifocals. So
Listen, the new kids had typewriters back in the day. We didn't have these fancy
I,
fonts.
that's fair. I get
It's
it. I mean,
typewriters.
the choice of font is
It's an
pretty,
Evan style.
it is an Evan style. Uh,
Yeah.
well, Evan wears glasses. I mean, he's putting those of us who don't
Yeah,
always
but
look
his desktop screen's enormous. It's huge.
sure. He's probably one of those guys that like reads in like big, huge fonts. So like he's flipping a page on an electronic thing like every couple of minutes or every 30 seconds. Who am I kidding? Um, but yeah, where did I see it? There was somewhere else we were promoting this where the font was like, was it on the box? Oh, it's on the box. Like,
Oh,
kudos. I will say that on Evan. Like, yeah, the font on the box, cool. I love it. But put something readable for God's sake on the bottle, so I'm not
all
squinting.
you old people and you're
All
complaining.
us old people. That's right. Well, that's what we do, Harmony. I'm on the backside of 40. You got nothing to do but complain about stuff. So
You've earned it. You've
that's
earned it.
right. Got over the hill. Okay. The other Raasay, the Chinkapin one. We haven't really been speeding through this, but that's okay.
Yeah,
Um,
we're doing good.
very sort of fudgy, earthy. Like I'm not getting a ton off the nose, but I know there's a lot there.
No, I didn't get almost anything on the nose the second time around, but the palate is still that like big ashy smoky chocolates, and you said bacon, it's meaty for sure. And I agree with you that over time in the glass, the first Raasay unpeated, it's a bit harsh and prickly. This second one doesn't come out the same way. Like it still feels like it's put together and not
Yeah.
as young and
Yeah.
flabby.
It doesn't seem as young as the
Yeah,
unpeated for sure.
yeah.
That's that mysterious Chinkapin oak at work. Um, On to the Torabhaig. Kind of felt like I needed a quick palate rinse after that last one.
Yeah, maybe some chocolate. No, just kidding.
Frederica's got the chocolate. I know. I do not
Oh,
have chocolate in front of me.
she does have the chocolate. That chocolate you had,
Her, yeah, that dark,
the chocolate coins, those were just amazing.
great. They're very enjoyable. I can't have good chocolate like that in my house or I eat it. Like it's not like I can't pace myself, I just eat it. So it's just best not to have it here. I think it's a side effect of like the ADD. Late in the day, the medication's wearing off, so you start craving quick calories. So where are you going to get that? Chocolate. Just can't have it.
So good.
Drost
Uh,
dark chocolate.
Torabhaig is so good. It's got this beautiful salty smoke, and it's so nice.
I know Bruce from Torabhaig would tell me to say to you, that's the well-tempered peat.
It's so well tempered.
So well-tempered. All right, we're gonna fire up the poll. Um, I mean, I think a lot of these whiskeys again show a ton of promise, but I
Yeah.
don't think I think I'm pretty clear. I know what my three favorites are. I don't even need to go back. I don't need to second guess it.
Yep.
But ladies first, Harmony.
Um,
What are your
well,
favorites? I'll let you have three. I'll let you have three.
ooh, okay, I feel like the votes, I mean, I close the votes. I don't like
Yeah, I
seeing them
minimize it because you don't want to.
immediately. I didn't do it soon enough, and you guys are reading my mind. But I would have to say, because I drank the Arrival and completed that bottle, it's definitely in my top three.
Okay, yeah, like it.
The Hearach as well.
Mhm.
Um, it shows great promise. I would like to try releases 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Mhm.
Because I'd like to see how their marriage of casks would be different. I imagine the malt's probably similar, but um, and the Torabhaig, I really liked that originally, but I, I've always been like a secret silent cheerleader for Raasay. So I'm gonna go with the Chinkapin oak just in like a vote of hope for the distillery. I hope
We
but the Torabhaig was also awesome, although that would count as four, but that's
I don't know. I don't know that we need to give them like a pity vote. Like I've tried other stuff from them. I think is great too.
but I
Um,
mean like they're so young and I drank my first one, so I'm going off of glass because I found the notes just a little bit hard to get to. And same with the second Raasay, I need more and more time.
I think the other thing that we maybe should have done is like intentionally added water to the two Raasays
Yeah,
because because
juice all over it.
everything else is at 46%. And those are the only two that aren't. So it's probably not a fair comparison to apples to orange, everything else. But I agree with you. Um, I'm more or less on the same page. Um, I think I'm Hearach first. I'm Torabhaig second, and I'm Holyrood third. To
Yeah.
put my money where my mouth is, as it were. I like them all. I think one of the things about peat is that it allows you. Well, I've said this. I know this is the
Yeah.
case. Peat allows you. It's more forgiving. If you've got some element of peat in your whiskey, it's more forgiving at a younger age. And
Hmm.
it's the analogy that I used to paint back in the day, no pun intended here, is like if you're doing a painting but you don't let yourself use black, but then the guy next to you can use black. There's going to be like more depth in it. Like you've added another color that the other painting can't use. So just by virtue of that, you'd think that there's going to be something more there. And I think that's that element that, especially at a young age, Pete adds to the spirit. But
Hmm.
um, the Raasays were good. I mean, frankly, I even the Inchdarnie, like I didn't know what to expect. Never tried it, maybe poo-pooed it because of the price. But, you
I
know,
poo-pooed it because when I went to the tasting, he was all about the bottle, and we talked about the bottle for so long. I was like, just pour me the whiskey. I'm not buying your bottle. In fact, the weight of your bottle upsets me because I know it's part of our cost after things get shipped. So I was irritated by his beautiful bottle with the waves and the everything and the hammered steel neck. I just want to try the whiskey. And also
You're
my food
triggered.
was very cold. So at that point, the whiskey was fine. So,
I, I think it's a great tragedy that the food got cold before you were able
we were waiting for people to drive in from Banff, but they served the food. And I was like, these people can eat when they get here.
to. Well, let me ask this. How many people were at the table? We're going to go by Emily Post rules here. How many people were there?
There was over 20 people.
There's more than eight. You can eat as soon as the food's put in front of you.
I
You don't have to
know.
wait. Those are Emily. Those are rules that go back to the 19th century. I'm pretty sure. So
I wish
throw
I
it in
knew
your
this
face.
rule.
Eat your warm food and let people judge you. Um, and just be happy that you ate your food when it was warm.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to share the votes here, the results.
Yeah.
Um, Harmony, it looks like you were in the dominant opinions here. Holyrood Arrival #1,
Oh,
Hearach
yeah.
#2, and then a tie between the Raasay Chinkapin Oak, the Peated, and the Torabhaig Allt Gleann. For second favorite, it looks like it's a tie between Torabhaig and Hearach. So
Ooh, cool.
because it seems like the top three were the top three. There was some universality to it.
Yeah.
Were
They
um,
were all good though. Yeah.
yeah, and almost everybody got a vote. Not quite everybody, but almost everybody got a vote. So maybe people were judging that metal hammered neck or something, or the
Don't
price.
let me persuade you. No.
But anyway, cool lineup tonight. Great range. Thank you, Harmony, for doing this with me as always. I know there might be some questions here. Mark saying was really interested to try the Holyrood, the Hearach and Raasay. Not disappointed. Which one do I buy?
All of them.
Yeah, and actually, it's a fair point to mention. If you do purchase the bottles that you are taking part in one of our tastings, the staff will give you a discount. So put that in the memo field.
Yeah.
Kevin,
And if you order the Hearach, you get a free Hearach etched Glencairn glass.
right, we do have glasses to give away with the Hearach.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, thanks everyone for the comments. Kevin was asking, did you share them?
Yeah, I saw that, but I don't know what he's speaking
What
to.
was that a reference to something that came out of my mouth or Harmonies or the chat? We need some. I never saw the. Oh,
Oh, the votes. Yeah, we did.
yeah. I mean, I can share them again. I think
No,
here.
you
Share them
didn't
once
share them.
more. There you go. Hopefully you can see them now. Um, and I think you get to scroll through them yourself, but there
Yeah,
they are. Anyway, I think that's a wrap for tonight, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully we'll see some of you Tuesday for the um,
Thursday.
rare and what's Thursday?
I don't know. It said we don't have a tasting until Tuesday?
Yeah, no, we
Weird.
it's not dry February, but it's kind of dry-ish February at
I
Kensington.
hate dry February.
Slowed it down. We didn't want to go like fully slowed down because that wouldn't be our style. But we'll see some of you for Rare and Old next Tuesday, and Society maybe Wednesday, and then after that the Lassies Festival. So have a great night, everyone. Thanks for taking part in the tasting. Hope you enjoyed it. If we didn't cover anything or you have any questions, send us an email. We'll be happy to let you know. And yeah, we'll see you then. So take care.
All right. Good night, everyone.